Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So I saw something yesterday that Trump said, which just disqualifies everything he says, and he treating his people horribly, like you know, his supporters. We're gonna get into it, and I want to do the introduction first because YouTube doesn't like you to swear in the first like 3 minutes of your videos, and I'm gonna be swearing. I'm eager to get to this thing. It's something I showed everyone in the last video, but I thought quite a bit about it last night. I got all this supporting clips of Trump and what all this stuff means. And so let me get to the comment first, and then I want to get right into the other stuff. It's like, something that needs to be said. And so this isn't about the person's comment, but I want to talk about the person's comment. And but mostly this is about the YouTube bot auto generated response. Paul, I was wondering, have you ever thought about putting your content in a podcast format for new viewers, listeners, probably better than Rumble? Um, the bot's response is, it's all on the channel. And the other person says, I am a visual person, so video is my preferred format. This is what the bot said. I'm a visual person, so the video is my preferred format. What a bizarre thing to say. How would the bot know that? How would the bot know whether I'm a visual person? Just weird, like leaps of whatever. Like it's just like playing roulette with the like with the comment, like just assumes things or making it's a hit or miss type of thing. It is kind of a podcast what I do, but the video clips in terms of what I'm talking about content, like what I'm going to do today, make the videos better. Like podcasts are very whatever, they're the big thing right now. But it's always been kind of like a podcast what I do. Except I'm not interviewing people. I mean the podcasts are more about interviewing and having multiple people have a discussion and things, which I appreciate that format, but it's not what I do well. People would respond better if I did a live kind of broadcast and they could comment and you could get a lot more money generated through like donations. That's how, people have done it in the past. But my show would be a lot worse. Like I would be distracted by the comments, responding to comments. I'm not a social person. And, if I'm in a conversation with somebody, their energy affects me. Their consciousness affects me. And it's distracting. Like, the insights that I have are so much more available to me if I'm just sitting by myself talking and I get into a more meditative state, I'm more relaxed, and I don't have to be social. Like I don't have to think about the other person and responding to them. Because of the Sajmarg method of meditation, I can like hear people's, like I can feel their reaction. Like I can kind of, I know what they're thinking. Like it's just part of it's doing the meditation. Part of it's just my training as a counselor. In terms of doing psychological assessments. But I'm sensitive to, and I read people's, whatever their responses, and I can tell when somebody's reacting to what I'm saying, and I could feel, let's say I was talking in front of an audience, and I said something, and there was 20% were Trumpers, and I said something about Donald Trump. I would feel the reaction of their resistance to what I'm saying. And then I'd have to deal with that, right? Instead of just being able to say the truth as I felt it and saw it, I don't have to deal with anybody else's bullshit and their reactions. And so it makes what I'm doing here better. And, it doesn't pull me outside of myself, right? It's just, where I'm going into a sort of meditative state and information can come through me, that's not necessarily coming from me, coming from some, etheric, being or some, the God or whatever it is, right? And so like this is where I do best. That's why I don't do these other types of shows. people have to either rise up to something or, whatever it is. They have to appreciate something. My show's never going to be something that's going to appeal to the masses and to, certain levels of people that are, they're just not capable of seeing beyond whatever superficial things that they see, right? It's something that people have to, have a sense of, like, just in terms of who I am as a person. When people meet me, people have a reaction to me, and some people just like love me, right off the bat, like without anything. They just feel something there that is beyond, they have to get past me being, kind of an asshole or whatever, or just not friendly or, just, I mean, I'm not reaching out to, I'm not a good social person, a person that networks, a person that's going to win people over in terms of my, warmth and kindness and my, I mean, there's people who are great at that, and I'm like on the low end of that kind of thing. Like, I'm never going to win people over based on my behaviors. Like, people have to see past, my personality or my, my not wanting to interact with people. Most of my social relationships in the initial part is people who really, want to have me as a friend or whatever, in terms of my love life or whatever. It comes from the other person being more, assertive and having to, look past, whatever my initial reactions because I'm not interested in that. Like, I'm not pursuing that, right? So, I enjoy my alone time or whatever it might be. And so, I like interacting with people. I mean, over the years, but, people who are introverted, highly introverted, they recharge from being alone and they get drained when they're with other people. So, anyways, just a weird comment from this bot, weird response. But like the format's not really going to change that much because it's what I'm able to do, and I've gotten proficient at it. And what I have to offer that maybe sets me apart is thrives with me being able to be by myself and just talk, and just be able to say whatever needs to be said without any kind of reaction from other people that would be present, right? Like, I tighten up more. It's easier for me to get into this kind of state where I'm more, able to allow the energy to flow. I tighten up more when I'm with other people, and then your consciousness is pulled out. Like, when there's kids learn through playing. When you're a little kid, you learn through playing. That's how you're integrating yourself into the world. Like, there's kids are learning through observing their parents and things. You see a kid will play. Kids will be learning how to do things, building things. When kids are just sitting on the floor, and now, of course, they give their kids iPads or things like this, at a young age, which is a bad idea. There's no rush to get into technology, but just having physical things to play with. Kids will play with each other and they learn to share and they learn to, then there's social things, but then there's times kids just are playing by themselves. And when you have an abusive parent that yells at you, the kid ends up, when the kid has to be concerned about their parent, like their parent's, emotionally out of control in some way. And so the kid they can't dive into their play. There's times kids are playing, you watch little kids, and they have no idea you're even in the room. They're just lost in their play, and they're developing, they're integrating things. They're, like you're born where you're a blank slate and you have all these things you have to integrate from past lives. A lot of your destiny, what you're going to become, is based in things that you already have in you as a little kid, and they just haven't been awoken yet. They haven't been like activated. It's like a computer that has all these programs on it, and you have to activate all these things, right? You have to, open them up, and these different, like program. That's a good way to look at what these. You have a package of things you're gonna have to deal with. Could be good things, bad things, abilities. Your job, your personality. Like, all these things are gonna come through. But as a kid, you don't have those in you, and you have to, activate these things. And as initial stages, a big part of that's just you playing and doing things like that. And so the kid, ends up. And so this is an example. Something I wasn't going to talk about this, and it just came to me while I was, talking about the other thing. Right? I had no idea I was going to talk about this today, but like I started talking, and then just through the flow of the, whatever. It's like this is the beauty of me being able just to do this thing where I'm, talking by myself here. It's just that information ideas just come to me. I pick up the microphone and I get into this sort of meditative state or whatever. And so, whatever. This is like the example of that. And so the kids start realizing they have to be aware of their parent. It's like a predator is in the environment. There's something unsafe in their environment, and they can't dive into their play. They can't, just be a kid. They have to be aware that their parent might come and hit them or yell at them or, whatever, abusive situation. The kids, the siblings are all fucked up because the parents are, it's an unsafe environment. And the kids don't develop all the things they need to develop, especially like when they have to end up being like, some kids have to assume parental duties at 9 years old because their parents are absent. They have to survive. They have to cook for themselves. They have to feed themselves. Their parents aren't there. The parents are using drugs, whatever. Like this is a common thing. One of the parents is left. The mom's overwhelmed, whatever kind of thing, whatever situation is. And kids have to grow up too fast, and they don't get to just be kids and develop these internal worlds, right? They have no, internal worlds. They're just these shallow people, I was thinking about this last night that, a lot of times when you're dealing with people who, especially for women, but, men as well, who are really good looking, like they're the kind of people who their looks, what they look like externally and how people see them, and they put a lot of effort into it, whether it's exercise or, makeup and hair, women who are just, over the top focused on how they look and using that, how they look as a tool because they just get advantages, like people who are better looking get treated better and they get all these things just gifted to them. And they don't have to develop things internally, right? They're oftentimes very superficial people. All these like beauty queens and all this stuff. And then they get older and their faces, like they become shitty people. As somebody who develops their internal world, they have a glow. People who become saintly at the highest level, but just, good people who develop a good internal world and have good characters and they live good lives and they're right with God. They have a connection to God and their soul. As they get older and they, everyone's just not going to look not physically, attractive. I mean, you're going to get wrinkled. You're going to get, just what happens to old people. But they have a glow and they're very attractive, not in a sexual way, but they're attractive to people. Because when you look at them, you're like, oh, wow, that's a good person. Like you can feel their essence. They've lived a good life and they have something to offer. They have a rich internal world. But people who are successful in superficial ways, if you're like a good athlete or you're, whatever, you're really smart or whatever, you have these things that aren't about developing something inside. And then the external world is just there for you and you're very successful because of it. You end up not developing anything inside. Like everything's externalized to you because you have all this positive feedback in the external world and you're gifted a lot of things and you never develop anything that would be substantial inside of you, right? Because when you go through painful things and disappointments and difficulties, I mean, not only are they spiritual blessings, they're gifts for you because the cleaning that you can go through. You also have to go inward and develop some abilities to deal with trauma and difficulties and challenges. And if you don't do that, then you have nothing inside. And there's so many people who, of course, now with the internet, they don't develop anything inside. They don't develop strong internal worlds. And, there's a vast universe. I was going to talk about this. It just came to me, too. So I was going to talk about this last night. And, of course, I want to get to this Trump thing because it's really, to me, an important video of something that I haven't seen before. I mean, I've seen it, but not like this. And I haven't talked about it the way I'm going to talk about it today. But this, this thing's kind of important. So in the Sajmark system, there is a thing called the Maha Parala. The Maha Parala. We were talking about Maha being the word for great. Other person said it means highest. It's not going to translate well to, English, but there's these words, like the Persian language has something like 50 or 100 words for love, various words for it. Like we have one. Like there's We have a language that's good for business. English is a good business, and it affects the way that you see the world and think because of that, right? Because love should have more than one word. Like love is, and what does love mean to people? Like love has so many different meanings to people. There's some people who've never felt the energy of love, and so love means something completely different to them, right? And where love means to people, showing you affection in a like building you up. I'm getting all this love from my fans. I'm getting all this love from my followers. Is it real love or is it just they tell you how great you are? So love isn't compliments, right? Like love isn't like love is a feeling and it's something beyond that. So people say love when there's no love there, like no feeling of love, right? There's affection, there's kindness, there's appreciation, there's positive regard, and so these different aspects of the word love. But anyways, this word maha pralaya, I'm not pronouncing it right, but it's there in the literature, is when the universe implodes on itself, right? And so it's something really to think about. I think I thought about this quite a bit because it came up a number of times in Babaji's writing that eventually the universe expands. The universe is expanding right now. And it expands to a certain level after so many years. And then it implodes. It contracts. And everything that's in creation, all the physical worlds, everything in the universe, and the universe is so much more vast than we know about. But even more importantly, we all have an internal universe. We all have our own, whatever's going on inside of us. And there's all these etheric universes where beings of energy are on a different plane of existence and where our soul exists. And that's even more vast than the material universe. I mean, it's not, you can't, it's beyond time and space. But, we're talking about infinity, in terms of like what people would think infinity is. And all of that disappears. There's nothing. Everything goes, like everything. And it's hard to think about. Like if you think about that, it's almost like scary that there wouldn't be anything. You wouldn't exist. I wouldn't exist. Nothing would exist. The earth wouldn't exist. Everything that we know in a life, and then our soul energy. And it all contracts to a possibility to be created again. Like this has happened before. So in the Sajmar concept of creation, now you think about this, the very childish version, like what I'm talking about, compare it to what you heard as a Christian or as a Jewish person in terms of, I think Muslims believe in the same thing. The idea of Adam and Eve and this, God created the heaven and earth. It's partially true, the book of Genesis, but it's very remedial. And so what I'm saying here is that there was this nothingness, like there's just nothing. But there's this primary stir. And there's this thought, which is, the idea of God. Like there's the female, which is the nothing, the emptiness, the possibility, like if you think about the womb or the earth, a seed going into the earth, right? And this idea comes, the masculine idea comes and says, let it be, and this idea of just this mere suggestion. And then out of the nothingness, this creation happens. And it happens on all these different levels, the etheric level and the material level. And everything starts expanding and creating. And then there's consciousness, there's individual consciousness, our souls, and things like this, and then all these different levels of creation, right? And so, it's a very interesting idea. And it expands, and then you have all the things that develop over time. And you have these worlds, and then there's physical life and the third dimensional aspect, and then these other etheric dimensions, right? There's all these different dimension of time and space and all these things. And then there's just this expanding of this creation, right? And at some point, it goes the opposite way. It implodes. And this is called the Mahaparala. This is going to go in the Journey series, and I should put this up on Gratefulness Meditation. And so, it's something you can't get bogged down on and think about every day. But it's something where you're like, well, it's at some point everything's going to come to an end, right? If this thing is true. Like it's either true or not. And I believe it to be true. Because that's how, like, it's like the universe is exhaling right now, and that exhale lasts quadrillion years, whatever it is. There's a period of measurable by the fourth dimension of time, right? That there's we have a linear concept of time and then the circular concept of time. But there is, when the thing was created, the universe was created, that there was, like how did things come to be? Like how did the material world come to be? Like how did the earth come to be? And when was that? In terms of what we measure as time. So we measure time as a linear, like here on earth, things are happening, in a, there's past, present, and future. And we have that, constraints. And in other dimensions, there's none of that because you can bounce around all over the place. And you're an etheric being because you're not bound by, your soul is not bound by the physical laws of linear time, the fourth dimension. But there was a creation. There had to be a creation. In science, there's a creation. There's the Big Bang. In, religion, there's the idea of creation. Christianity, in the book of Genesis, it's, God created the heavens and the earth in 7 days, right? Of course, it's not measurable by time because time didn't exist. Nothing did. And so there's no in 7 days because there's, a day is measured on earth, a 24-hour period, right? And that's not, God wasn't bound by the earthly time, the idea of time on earth and, the whole way that we have a daily cycle, right? Because a daily cycle has to do with the rotation of the earth and the sunlight, right? And so, like, doesn't exist anywhere else. Days only exist on Earth as a measurable time period. All the other planets rotate, so a day would be a different period of time, right? And so, whatever that, means. And so, at some point, it has to all end. And so, this idea of the Mahaprala. And Babaji referenced it numerous times in his teachings, in his books, and in his diary, the second master of the system. And he was so devoted to meditation and doing God's work that there was one point in his diary where he writes, today, God gave me the equation for the Mahaprala. There's a mathematical equation or something that once it's activated, it sets in course the implosion of the universe. And he said, and of course, I ignored it. It's this great passage because, his diary is like, today I had toothache and, today I intercommuned with Krishna or Jesus or, and he didn't have any idea these diaries would be published. Like he didn't write the diaries. It was just things he was noting down. And he had this operation where he really didn't have memory like most people do. And it got worse over the years where he almost had no memory, where he just had to be in the moment constantly. And he wouldn't remember things because he was focused and he was so, otherworldly that when his son died, he had a couple of kids that died. But when his first son died, he experienced, grief in the normal type of what people would. The second son, he didn't know he was dead because he was saw his soul. And his soul was hanging around for a while and he had no idea his son was physically dead for a while. Because he was just kind of gone into the etheric world. As you get older, you become more, you're no longer of this planet. And so, he had this experience where he was given the equation to bring about the dissolution of the universe. It's called the dissolution, that's what he calls it. If you look it up in the appendix, Mahaprala means dissolution of the universe. And so in the idea of this kashob, which is a Sanskrit word that means primary stir, there was this initial, very subtle thought from God. And from that thought, human beings' thought force has come from, like our individual thought force and our individual ability to create things. And so when people think of human beings as godlike or God, the element that's in them that's that's divine in nature, we have this ability to manifest things and higher developed levels of consciousness that any animal, any creature that has any soul that has this level of consciousness, like there's soul energy behind trees and stones and things like this, right? everything has to have some etheric element behind it. There's soul energy in everything. But a soul for something that's a human being, you have, like, you look at the difference between animals and people, and you look at the evolutionary sort of spectrum of animals, it's the ability to manifest things. There's animals that can do inventions, and they can, they have levels of thought, higher levels of thought than other creatures, right? Some creatures have more capacity for, almost like abstract thinking. And of course, human beings have the ability to create, in complete worlds. Like people have these, like the Lord of the Rings, for example. A human being created this world, J.R.R. Tolkien, or, the stuff with Harry Potter, where they create this whole universe. And people inhabit that universe, like they dress up like the characters of the movie and TV shows, and they act out these things, and, they think about it. Like, there's people who know how to speak Klingon, right? These Star Trek people. Because this universe is, they call it the Marvel universe, or the Star Trek universe, or the Star Wars universe. And these things exist, right? That have come out of a human creation and human manifestation. They're ideas, but they, all these mythical creatures and things that people have either imagined or connected with that existed here on planet Earth before or somewhere else or something, right? But this is, people's ability to manifest things. But anyways, so, there you had this person who, in terms of the Sajmark system, who was capable of having this equation. Like, who would you give that equation to? Like, can you think of somebody that is in this, that that you'd want the equation to bring about the dissolution of the universe? That if you, thought about it and applied your will force to it, because Babaji wrote that there was going to be a soul that was going to have to activate this equation. There was going to be a being that was going to have to, at the end of time, was going to be responsible for activating this equation to bring back, some consciousness, whatever it was, so etheric consciousness or, living, whatever it might be, to bring about the dissolution of the universe and destroy everything that exists, right? And when you think about things like that, like if you believe that that's going to happen, then everything else becomes kind of relevant, or irrelevant. Like, well, what difference does it make about this minor problem I have in my life when at some point everything's going to come to an end, right? It's hard to even conceive of such a thing. So I had this thought last night, then I forgot about this completely this morning, and then I started talking, and it came back to me. And I think there's something else I want to say, but either I'll remember that today or not. I'm eager to get into this thing with Trump because it's kind of in terms of what's going on in the world right now, in terms of the Trumpers, it's very telling. Which is another example of, Trump, he's going to lie, this thing that I said yesterday about him. I showed you this clip from Don Lemons about Trump saying that Hamas was making condoms into bombs, right? And so, I unpacked that a little bit. I thought quite a bit about it last night. I was talking to my wife about it. It's a very significant thing that happened. And so let's get into that here. Okay, so let's start here.
We are merely looking at parts of the big bureaucracy where there has been tremendous waste and fraud and abuse. In that process, we identified and stopped $50 million being sent to Gaza to buy condoms for Hamas. 50 million. And you know what's happened to them? They've used them as a method of making bombs. How about that?
How about that? How about that, motherfucker? Okay, so I only know about this because YouTube recommended a video for me about Don Lemons talking about the fake Christian Barbie and her, saying these things that we're responsible. And I don't know why the left-leaning media wasn't playing this clip everywhere. And maybe they were, and I just missed it. I didn't watch the news for some days or whatever. But why this wasn't a bigger deal? Like, why didn't I hear about this before? Because this is epic. Like, I already had my initial reaction, but I thought about this, like, last night quite a bit. And so it means that Donald Trump and the whole Doge thing has zero credibility now. Nothing they say can be trusted. And, he's a proven liar, and he, faked his assassination thing, all the things that I've documented and talked about, and all these things, right? But this is specifically bad. And it's just so blatant. It's just right in your face. So the first thing to understand is he's lying to his supporters. These are the only people that are going to believe this bullshit, right? Even Don Lemons. Don Lemons is one of the stupidest MNFers out there. He's just this low-level consciousness, and he doesn't get things. And he's laughing at this, right? So, the left, nobody on the left is going to believe that Hamas was making bombs out of condoms, right? It's fucking stupid. Me and my wife were joking about it, like, right before bed, like for like 10 minutes, like how stupid it was. I thought of some jokes like how the Palestinian people, where they run out of rocks and now they got to throw water balloons with condoms. There's a movie called, I think it was called The Summer of 45 or something like that. It was a kind of a weird movie where it took place on one of these barrier islands in the Carolinas. And this kid ends up having a crush on some woman whose husband's a soldier. Like, he's off in World War II or something. Old movie. Like, it was old when I saw it. Like, it was probably from the 60s. And she finds out that he's dead. And, like, she's going through an emotional time, and he comes over to the house to help out. And she has sex with him. So it's like how he lost his virginity. I think it's based on some true story thing, right? And there's a funny scene where they're trying to buy condoms. And they're in the store, and the guy goes, "You guys know what these things are for?" And the kid says, "Yeah, you fill them up with water and you throw them like water balloons." Like it's, so it's like this, whatever the thing is. Kind of an odd movie. But, like it's just a stupid idea that these things could ever be weaponized. They're just, synthetic rubber, thin synthetic rubber, right? Like you can hear the reaction of the crowd. Like how the fuck you can make that into a bomb? But the first thing I want to say, this is the most important piece. Nobody outside of Trumpers would ever believe this. It's stupid. And he's treating his people like you're complete morons, like you're the R words, like he's treating you like you're just imbeciles, like idiots. That's what he thinks about you, because it's not for any other audience. The only people he's talking to are the idiots that follow Trump and hang on his every word and thinks he's the second coming of Christ. Because no person in their right mind would ever think, would have, anybody with any sort of level of consciousness or intelligence would think that you could make a bomb out of a frickin' condom. And, it's the whole lie about the Gaza Strip, right? The whole everything about the Gaza Strip that Trump is perpetrating, how somehow it's okay and justified that it's Hamas's fault that Israel is land grabbing that area. And only his most staunch supporters would believe Trump is acting wisely and fairly in this area, and that he wants to purchase or own the Gaza Strip just on American authority. All the shit that he said, all the stuff that he said about Hamas, the idea that the Israelis are releasing prisoners of war and the Hamas is releasing hostages. Like the idea that Hamas is so much worse than the bullying Israeli army that has all the power. The fact that a Palestinian life, there's hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who have been killed, maybe even like 1 million of them. And there's some thousands of Israelis who've been killed since the beginning of the conflict because Palestine doesn't have an army. And Palestine hasn't encroached on any of Israel's land. There was a partition. And partition, this land that was once Palestine is now Israel. And Israel is a state of Israel. It's a recognized country that has a seat in the UN. So, the UN General Assembly. And Palestine is not. So it doesn't exist as a country even. And Israel won't allow it. And that they're pushing for this. This whole lie, all the lies to do with Israel and Hamas and the Gaza Strip. And that's part of what Trump's saying, right? That these guys, the Hamas is like the devils, and this idea that they're going to unleash hell. I mean, let's go, let me play that meme here.
Including when the gates of hell will be opened, as they surely will.
Okay, so who opens the gate of hell? This is what I said before. Like, why are you dealing with hell? Why are who's going to open the gates of hell? Who has permission to do that? And why would you ever do that? Why would any person say they're going to open the gates of hell? I mean, it is like they are. This is hellish. This is devilish shit, right? What they're doing to the Palestinian people, and with Trump and the whole thing with Gaza. But going back to what they said, let's play this clip again.
We are merely looking at parts of the big bureaucracy where there has been tremendous waste and fraud and abuse. In that process, we identified and stopped $50 million being sent to Gaza to buy condoms.
Okay, that Elon Musk said that was a lie. And they made up another lie that was going to Mozambique, which apparently isn't true either. It's hard to say, but at least we know the first thing is a lie. They didn't send the condoms to Gaza.
For Hamas. 50.
And then they didn't go to Gaza, and they're not going to Hamas, right? So, it's just freaking stupid. Because how are they going to get them to Hamas, right? Israel's got their military in Gaza, and they're dropping these bunker buster bombs, and they still can't find Hamas, allegedly. Like, Hamas is, they can't hide in an area that's only 20 miles long. It's not even a country, right? This isn't, you can't compare. It's like a city. Gaza is a city, a small city, right? And so the square footage of Gaza. So we asked the bot here what American city is about the same size as a Gaza Strip land-wise. The Gaza Strip is approximately 141 square miles, 365 square kilometers. That's a relatively small area, but it's densely populated. Here are some cities that are roughly the same size. Philadelphia is a little bit bigger. Detroit is a little bit smaller. And Las Vegas, Nevada, right? So these were cities that are about the same size as Gaza. So I asked them, how much bigger is Los Angeles than Gaza Strip? And Los Angeles is 469 square miles. Gaza Strip is 141. So it's 3.3 times larger. It's not a country, right? It's just a small little city. I mean, area-wise, you've been to some of these cities, whatever it is. You have some reference point. It's not a big area. And it's like densely populated, 1.7 million people in that small area. Israel's bombed the shit out of it, and they still can't find Hamas. They still can't find their hostages that Hamas allegedly has. So how are they going to fucking drop off condoms? Hello? Where's Hamas? Yeah, we're looking for Hamas. We got a big delivery. We got $50 million worth of condoms so they can make bombs out of them. Like, it's fucking stupid, right? It's just because Hamas is up for Donald Trump. And so they made up this fucking lie that this waste of money. And, they're combing through the federal, budget and this, all these various types of governmental spending, right? This is the whole Doge thing, right? USAID, all these things. And they're coming up with these things that seem outlandish, which I'm going to show you Rand Paul reading some of these things, some of the things that we've heard before. And it's all lost all credibility now. Because if you're going to lie about this, then you can't trust these guys about anything. And so, it's just a stupid fucking idea. This is a really bad lie. It was fucking moronic, right? Only a moron and an evil moron would make up such a bullshit story. And he's lost all credibility. Not that he had it before, but this is so blatant, right in your face. All of this represents.
Biden stopped $50 million being sent to Gaza to buy condoms for Hamas. 50 million. And you know what's happened to them? They've used them as a method of making bombs. How about that?
How about that? Like, so fucking stupid, right? And again, no Democrat's going to believe this. The mainstream media isn't going to believe this. The liberal media, the independent people aren't going to believe it. People already know Trump's a lying piece of shit. The only people he's saying this for if he's thinking about an audience, I don't know what he's thinking about. Like, is he gone senile? Like, it's such a blatant lie. But again, lying about the idea that this $50 million was spent on condoms. And, the other idea here is the reason that America and the UN sends condoms to people is because they want to depopulate that area. So India, China, and various parts of Africa, they send these things to, these different types of, devices or whatever it is to get the people to stop getting pregnant, right? To stop reproduction. And so they already have a way of controlling the population in Gaza Strip, and that's the Israeli army. They're not looking to, stop babies being born there. They're looking to eradicate the people that are already there, right? And so, why would they be sending condoms to Hamas? It makes zero sense. And it's not true. Like, it's not true. Like, they've even admitted it's not true. And so, it's a bad lie to say they're sending them to the Gaza Strip because it makes no sense. And, the people there are under siege, and I mean, their population's already being reduced, as is their land. We all know what's going on there. And so that's one stupid lie. But the second lie where he says they're sending them to Hamas, well, that makes no sense at all. Like, they can't find those fucking guys, right? Hamas holes. It's an Israeli asset. I mean, it's the only reasonable explanation. And so that's another lie. But the real fucking kicker here is that he said that they're using them to make bombs. It's just so stupid. And again, it's how he feels about his supporters. If you're a Trumper, whatever Trumpers that still come here, he thinks you're a complete idiot. Like, he has no respect for you. He's treating you like you're an absolute imbecile. It's when people lie to you, this shows he has no respect for the people that, he thinks the people that support him are dumb. He thinks they're just morons. Again, there's no other explanation for this. Either that or he's gone completely senile. He has no, mental concept of what he's saying because he knows that's a lie. I mean, like, he knows that he's such, Trump's natural inclination, his default position is to just bullshit and make things up. Like he did with eating the dogs. He says whatever he has to say in a debate, in a confrontation. He'll make anything up and use his authority and his bullying of his, having a stronger legal team and more resources behind him. And he'll slander people all the time. He's done that in the past. When he's in some sort of a battle with somebody, when he's running against somebody or the people who are prosecuting him, and he's committed crimes, right? And whatever they were going after him legally, whatever they do to go after Trump, he just makes shit up. Like, it's his default position. When he's trying to sell you stuff, he makes stuff up, right? And he exaggerates, these like details, and so he's just a natural born liar. He lies about everything. His whole existence is a lie. He's a complete fraud. But now, if you're a Trumper, and they won't see it because Trumpers are so desperate, they'll believe anything at this point because they're so invested in Trump. But he's saying to you, I have zero respect for you. I will say anything to you and expect you to believe it. There's zero, you're just a stupid piece of shit, and I can say anything to you and you'll believe it. Like this idea that you could shoot someone in the face on Fifth Avenue. He has no respect for his followers. To say something this fucking stupid. And when someone's this bad of a fucking liar and he has no respect for you, then you can't believe anything he fucking says. Anything that he fucking does. That he's willing to make up such a fucking horrific lie. I mean, horrific in the sense of it being so stupid and something that is, almost immediately disproved. There's no way to walk this back. There's no way to make this thing and him and his reputation and who he is as a person. There's no way to do damage control on something so fucking stupid. That's so disrespectful to these people who have been so loyal to him. Again, he's lying to you. He's not lying to anybody else because no one, like even Don Lemons, isn't believing this. Even the stupidest people on the left wouldn't be like, is that actually true? Like, you immediately know that's bullshit. Like, there's no need to fact check it. Like any normal person with any ability for critical thinking skills would say, yeah, they didn't send condoms to Hamas. They didn't send $50 million worth of condoms to Gaza Strip. And you can't fucking make bombs out of condoms. Right? They're making them into bombs. They're not even using them correctly. They're not even, I mean, this is some of the jokes my wife and I was saying to my wife. This, of course, explains how all the dicks that have been blown off, all these exploding condoms, all these people have died having sex because of their explosions that are happening. Like that. This is all they have. They wouldn't be able to make bombs, but we gave them $50 million worth of rubbers, and now they have all these potential explosive devices. Right? It's just so like really stupid. Any Trumper who has any self-respect would be like, oh, this guy's a piece of shit and has been lying to me. I can no longer trust him or believe him. Is this the kind of fucking, this is how he treats me? This is the kind of respect he has for me and his fellow supporters. We've, supported him, defended him, gave him money. He's going to tell this kind of fucking lie? Get the fuck out of here. Like if any of your friends said to you, yeah, they were giving $50 million of rubbers to Hamas, and they turned them into bombs. You'd be like, fucking, you're fucking with me? Right? Like you think I'm an idiot? Like, it's ridiculous. And so, like I said, let's move to the next piece here. No matter what else is said, there's no credibility for this. So you have to understand that the Trumpers aren't seeing shit like this. And the Democrats don't see or hear or believe the stuff about the waste or all the stuff to do with the COVID debacle, all the truther stuff, the sheeple and the left-wing people don't hear any of that, right? Like you get one set of news and you're seeking out one set of news. And all the algorithms and all this way that's structured, you're not going to see this comment from Trump. I mean, I don't know how many people saw it before, but it was not, it didn't come across my radar screen, right? Only because I saw it on Don Lemon's of all places. And had I not clicked on that video, I wouldn't have even known that he said something so stupid. And he says shit like this all the time that it just goes, under the radar because he's just a barrage of bullshit coming out of his mouth. And this is the shit the liberals are seeing. And they think Trump's an idiot and his supporters are idiots. And it's true because he is, and they are, because this is the kind of bullshit that Trump is spewing. But there is real legitimate waste that they're finding, governmental waste, but the liberals and the Democrats aren't getting that news, and you're not getting this news, right? They've divided this, and people have put themselves into categories, and they're not seeking the truth. They're not looking to, when you have a thesis, when you're trying to prove a theory, a scientific theory, you have to figure out all the ways that it can't be true. Like you have to test it with the idea that you're trying to disprove it, right? This idea, and I talked about this myself. I came about this organically when I started making truther videos and people started really watching me. And I said, I have to make it clear between what's speculation and what's not, and, what's just hearsay, and, what things I believe but can't prove, and the things that can be factually proved. And very little can be factually proved based on just the stream of lies, because most of the stuff is what source are you going to believe, and it's a he said, she said, or they said, they said, they said, them said, whatever it is, right? It's just there's very little things that can be factually proved in terms of all the things that I cover here, because of just the immense amount of disinformation out there. And so you have to have some responsibility to your audience, and you don't spew things like this, like what Trump just said. And he must think people are so stupid that they would believe that. Like, what's going on inside of him that he would say something this egregious, right? It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. So let's move to this. This is where Trump, he shouldn't have any credibility anyway. He just has lied so much. And he lost all credibility when he faked that assassination attempt, but that's a little bit harder for people to get. It shouldn't be, but people the majority of people believe that's real. But everybody knows now, it's confirmed lie, that $50 million of condoms was not sent anywhere, and specifically not to Gaza, and not to Hamas. And you can't make bombs out of a fucking condom, right? So, like, this is, you know, there's just no way to excuse this, right? It's just a blatant lie. And so this is not a guy you can trust for information. I mean, this isn't the first thing, obviously, but this confirms everything you ever thought bad about Trump in terms of being a complete bullshitter. I mean, it's hilarious that people would believe this shit. Like, he just says stupid shit all the time. And, you know, a person who says things like this has no credibility. And their words mean nothing because somebody who's going to say something so fucking stupid, and he's supposed to be fucking the president, right? You know, so he's lost all credibility. So all this other stuff that he and Elon are supposedly uncovering, so nothing else he says about this can be trusted, or his administration, because his press secretary lied about this, Elon lied about it. And so, you know, again, it just undermines everything. That's why you don't fucking lie like this, because, you know, you can't be trusted.
I think the White House said that Elon Musk is not a Doge employee and has no authority to make decisions. Can you clarify for us today
Well,
what
Elon
his
Musk,
exact role is there?
yeah. Elon is, to me, a patriot. So, you know, you could call him an employee, you could call him a consultant, you could
A
call
patriot, that means nothing. Again, to me, it's a patriot. That doesn't mean, you know.
him whatever you want. But he's a patriot. I mean, look at the kind of things. I just said, just write it down, just in case that question got asked, right? And which I'm surprised it took so long, actually. But you know what? Ukraine's a bigger deal because people are dying by the thousands a week. Thousands.
Okay, so I'm going to get to he had a couple of crazy takes about Ukraine, some of which I agree with, which you will agree with. But, you know, he's coming off left field because he's triggered now by Zelensky. Like, he's fucking pissed about Zelensky. You know, he wants elections. He's all these things he's saying. And, you know, he's saying crazy shit about it because he just, you know, he thinks, you know, this is a typical Trump thing where he just makes up reality and he expects everyone to adjust to his version of reality. Like, this is how he is as a psychological, you know, his psychology is his internal world. Like I said this about Trump when he first got elected. You know, he was Mr. Trump, right? When you're a billionaire and you're a celebrity, and he was both. You know, he was a celebrity billionaire, somebody who, you know, not only had a lot of money or had a lot of success, and a lot of it's bullshit, but, you know, and people want something from him. They either want, you know, do business with him. They want, you know, some of his fame, and they get treated differently. Like, hey, Mr. Trump, hi, Mr. Trump. He was treated by all his employees, and like he was the decider, and whatever he said in the world of Trump with his kids and his people who work for him, it was the will of God. Whatever Trump said, Trump, you know, was the final barometer of reality. And all the people there had to buy into whatever he was saying. You saw it if you saw any of the episodes of The Apprentice, everything that Trump did was like a stroke of business genius. Even though the people were, like, a lot of stuff he did was head scratching. Even though he had the failures and the bankruptcies, which we'll get into more later. He is a failure, but in his world, Trump's word is the word of God, you know, to his inner circle of people. And so then when he became a politician, he expected it to be the same thing. And that's why he reacts when people push back against his bullshit. Well, you know, everywhere else people believe anything that I say, and you know, whatever I say is the word of God. And so that's when he says stupid shit like this, and now he has followers who believe anything he fucking says, or at least they'll you know, defend anything he says because their overall view of him as his savior. And so this is where he's coming from. He doesn't have any sense of, you know, that, like, he's just some fucking guy with stupid opinions like everybody else. You know, like, I'm a lot more right than Trump, and I don't take what I say very seriously. I mean, my track record is like probably, you know, 99%. I mean, very rarely do I get anything wrong, and certainly blatantly wrong. And I wouldn't say anything as stupid as you know, Hamas is using condoms as bombs. I mean, it's just silly. And I don't take what I say very seriously. Like I said, words don't really matter. Like, who cares if you're right? You know, does it affect anything? Well, you know, it's good for me because I can make good decisions. Like I can make appropriate decisions based on my ability to understand what's going on around me in my personal life and around me globally. And I make the right choices because I'm connected to God and I have a system. And so it's good for me. But other than that, it's just who cares? Like people don't listen to you. You know, there's that what's that woman's name in the Trojan horse story, Cassandra, and there's another character in the Mahabharata. Cassandra had the ability to see the truth, and not anybody would listen to her. She could tell you what's going to happen, and you have this with lots of people who are prophets, and nobody listens to them. You know, so people who see the truth are almost never listened to because people want to believe what they want to believe and they want to do what they want to do. And so there's a character in the Mahabharata, and Sidor, I forget his name. I could look it up, but there's two kings that are born of princesses. There's this, these kings couldn't procreate. There was two kings that couldn't procreate. And so they had this saint that came in and banged the king's wives. Like the king couldn't have sex for whatever reason. And so there was a saint, like some guy who lived like thousands of years, and he came in out of the woods and he was like filthy and disgusting. And they said, this guy would be a good guy to inseminate the two queens. But he was disgusting, and they were in a hurry for the girls to get pregnant. They were ovulating. He said, well, let me shower and let me clean myself up. And they're like, there's no time for that. Go bang these two, go bang these two queens. So one queen was completely, appalled by the disgusting, the guy being he'd been out in the woods for like 100 years, right? And so she turned pale. And so her son was born without pigmentation, right? And the other woman wouldn't look at the guy, closed her eyes, and her son was born blind. So you had a blind king, and then you had the son without pigmentation, who was later cursed himself and couldn't father his own kids. Whose name was Pandu, the Pandavas, and the Dhritarashtra was the blind king. And there was a maid servant, and they're like, just in case impregnate her, just in case these other ones don't take. And the maidservant just took it gratefully. She was open to it. And her son had the ability to see the truth, like he could see and he would see into the future. And nobody listened to him. Like he was just the bastard son of some maid that was around as kind of the brother of the kings, but he wasn't respected. And there's all these people who are in the history of every story. There's somebody who can see what's going to happen, or multiple people who see what's going to happen. See, how many movies does there an expert that comes in and says, well, this is what's going to happen, and nobody listens to the person, right? It's a scientist or it's this. And so none of this stuff matters because people don't want to hear the truth, right? They just don't. Let's get back to it here.
But look at this, from 90 to 99, Social Security, 6,054,000 people. Well, that's okay. Maybe that's possible. 90 to 99, maybe it's possible. It's a lot of people, though, at that. But people that live to 100 to 109, 4,734,000. Wow, that's a lot. That means over 100 years old. They have 4 million people. I don't know too many. I know people that...
You have trouble believing that many people live to 100, but you will say that fucking Hamas can make a bomb out of a condom? Holy fuck.
Doing great in their 90s, but not too many people over 100. But over 120, from 120 years old, people that are 120 years old up to 129, 3,472,000 people. Wow. That can't possibly be, because the record is I think it's one person, a woman, lived to 127, but they have 3,472. Okay, but now we're going really in. People from 130 years old to 139-year-old, 3,936,000. Wow. I wonder if people are getting paid with all this. I mean, are these checks, and that's what we're checking right now. People from 140 years old to 149 years old, 3,542,000, 140 years old and beyond. Now we're really going, because we're looking to break the record by 25 years. People from 150 years old to 159 years old, 1,345,000. These are in the, by the way, these are in the computer files. This is what they do well. They're super. I asked Elon, who are these Doge people? He said they're super brilliant computer people, and they look
Super brilliant. Super brilliant. They're the greatest. You know, like I said, yeah, okay, but why should we believe you when you said that Hamas could build bombs out of condoms, right? I mean, after all the lies Trump's told and all the bullshit he's spewed, all the things that he said, inflammatory things. And, you know, it's all to manipulate people. It's to scare them or to slander somebody or whatever it might be. And, you know, a person behaves in such a way is a bad person and not somebody who has a grasp on reality. Because it speaks more to what's going on inside of him, where he thinks he can just create reality and make up whatever, and it's true, right? You know, there's like this Saturday Night Live sketch where they have Picasso, and like he blows his nose and throws a Kleenex on the floor, and everyone calls it art, you know, right? And so that's what Trump thinks, you know, that everything he says is golden, and you know can be believed, and he exaggerates and he manipulates, and so this whole Doge thing could be a great thing to get rid of governmental waste. But when someone's so irresponsible, and Elon Musk is so fucking weird and so, you know, I mean, duplicitous and all the things that he is, he's like, if anybody's an evil fucking supervillain, you know, like some, you know, Bond villain or something, it's Elon Musk. And so, like, there's no credibility, right? Like, yeah, this would be horrible if this is happening, but how can we say it is?
love the country. It's simple. Wait a minute. People from 160 years old to 169 years, 121,000. So 160-year-old people. 170 to 179,000, 6,087. But now, let's go into the real numbers. From 200 to 209 years old, 879 people. From 210 years old, I haven't met any of them. And if I did,
What if there were people that old, right? What if they're like trying to hide that there are people that old, right? Because there was some guy in China that was supposed to be like 300 years old. And there was a time where people used to live thousands of years. Whatever, let's get back to it.
It would bless them. I would worship the ground they walk on. 210 to 219 years, 866. From 220 years old to 229 years old, 1,039. And then you have two people. From 240 years old to 249 years old, one person. And there's one person that's 360 years old. That's just that. And then, where's the money being spent, right? Let's go into that for just a second. $520 million for a consultant on the environment. It's called Environmental, Social, and Governance. Investments in Africa and mobilize private sector resources. $520 million. Somebody got $520 million for an environmental, sounds like an environmental study. I've always been one that paid a lot of money for my environmental studies, but I paid like $50,000, not $520 million. $520 million.
You know, I've talked about this so much about how exhausting it is to have to constantly read the ingredients, because we're constantly being lied to and poisoned and fucking, I mean, not just physically, but spiritually and mentally, and just the bullshits and the lies and all of it, right? And I'm not a scientist, and I don't have the ability to gather scientific data and also understand scientific data in its raw form. That's what these people like Fauci and these other people were supposed to do for us, right? Interpret scientific data, collect scientific data, and then interpret it for us, right? And the same thing that religions are supposed to do is understand, divinity, This is something that I am better at, than certainly the people that do religions. Understand it and disseminate it to people, right? Like, you can't be an expert at everything. And so when I've got a great car guy. He's fixing my truck. And he's somebody I trust implicity with the vehicle. He's very thorough and very inexpensive. He's not screwing me over, right? But, they can. Like, when you go to a car dealership, they can replace things that don't need to be replaced. And when you go to somebody, as a kid, some dentist put metal in my mouth that I didn't need for cavities that I didn't have, right? And so when trust breaks down, you have to end up doing research and knowing everything, and you can't, right? And so when they come out and they say, all right, this is what we're finding, it's only a matter of us having trust in Elon Musk and Trump and our belief that the government is completely fucked and that they waste our money and they spend our money, right? And so, which we all believe. But, this guy can't be trusted. He's done horrible things, horrible lies, and he's, doing really bad stuff in Gaza. And now he's, getting goofy with the Ukrainian thing, in which, the American people want that war to end and we don't want to spend money. The other thing is the American people don't want our money wasted, our tax dollars. That was my cord, my phone cord or the computer cord falling to the ground. I don't know if you heard that or not, but my dog did. He jumped. It made a kind of loud slapping sound. He jumped up a little bit. So, but anyways, people don't trust the American government and know there's governmental waste, so they're predisposed to believe all this stuff. The American government will spend money and launder money through all these various scams, as did Trump. It's also a guy who his two kids, his daughter Ivanka and her husband Jared Kushner got a $2.3 billion deal from the Saudi Arabians. He maximized and monetized his first presidency, and he was laundering money as well. And so they can catch the Biden administration. They find all this waste, but they're not believable. Like, especially when he tells lies about things like condoms. And so this might be true, but how do we know? Like, how are we going to figure that out? Because are we going to go through? I mean, people don't even want to do their own financial shit. They want to hand their shit over to an accountant and have them do their taxes or use some kind of TurboTax or something. People don't even like to keep their own account, their own budgets and, document everything they're spending money on. I mean, do you do that? Who likes to do that? And so who wants to comb through the government's bullshit and figure out where all this stuff is going, right? And so, maybe they're doing it, but who's to say? Like, this guy's not trustworthy. Elon Musk is fucking weird and untrustworthy, lying piece of shits, right? And so, the government's corrupt, but so are these guys. And this is where you get into it, his lack of credibility now, because of saying stupid shit. And the biggest thing he said that's stupid is that condoms can be made into bombs, right?
For ESG, $25 million to promote biodiversity, conservation, and promote licit livelihoods by developing socially responsible behavior in the country of Colombia. Well, it's nice, $25 million to go into Colombia.
Okay, so again, could be true, but is it, right? Okay, so this is Rand Paul.
The committee will come to order. Today we are going to dive into reckless and wasteful spending of our federal government, particularly when it comes to foreign aid. The United States should not be the sugar daddy for the entire world, especially not for countries and organizations who act contrary to our nation's beliefs. Our country is $36 trillion in debt, yet we continue to send billions of dollars overseas, often funding projects that are not just useless, but in many cases actively harmful.
This is believable, but this is coming on the heels of the Doge thing and Trump's lying, right? And, it's a one-sided thing. Like, it's criminals. I said this in a recent video, that whoever wins the election, you're choosing who's going to steal from you. That there's $5 trillion of taxpayer money and all the money of debt, that they're willing to increase the debt, because the debt is added spending for them. this $36 trillion of debt, that's all been looted. Like, that's all been money laundered and looted, right? By both sides. Like, they're coming in now, all of a sudden the Republicans are, oh yeah, we're going to create fiscal responsibility. But they've been the military-industrial complex scammers who have looted the American people out of trillions of dollars and now saddled us with all this debt. So there's a $5 trillion of income now, this tax revenue, $3 trillion like 5-10 years ago, then went up to 4 and then 5, and so the government gets to decide where that money goes. But then there's all the money that they're borrowing, all the money that's that's not tax, it's not income, it's credit. It's like the governmental credit card, and that's even more trillions of dollars, more than $5 trillion, whatever it is per year that they're spending. And they're getting money back from it, kickbacks. They all are. So, to think that the Republicans are coming in and they're going to get rid of the deep state, and especially when Trump tells these egregious lies, right? You can't trust any of them. Like, this is the whole thing, right? Like, you can't trust him. I mean, as a truther, you shouldn't trust him at all because the left-right paradigm. But this is like right in your face. If you're a Trumper and you're a Republican, you're buying into this shit that you're hearing. Well, it's, what about them? Like, what have they stolen? What about the things that they're getting kickbacks on, right? What about the deal with Israel? What about all these things that they, their money laundering schemes?
Taking the path to fiscal responsibility is often a lonely journey, but thanks to Elon Musk and Doge, they've brought to light the waste that I've been highlighting for over the last decade.
Doge.
Every year I release my Festivus report to expose
Festivus.
Ridiculous spending of the federal government, and this past year was no exception. I uncovered over $1 trillion in government waste, with the State Department and USAID being some of the worst offenders. Let me give you just a few examples of what these unelected bureaucrats are spending your hard-earned money on. $4.8 million went to Ukraine's public affairs office in Kiev to fund social media influencers. Instead of protecting our own border, $2.1 million was sent to Paraguay to enhance their border security.
I just have trouble listening to him. He's like kind of smug and annoying. I liked his dad better. But, so he goes on. This is a 6-minute video, and he lists all these things, right? And I can believe that these things are true. But I also, all these other factors, right? There's no credibility between Elon Musk and, when you're doing something like this, and you're fighting special interests. You're fighting people who are fighting for their jobs or fighting for their money or their kickbacks. There's people who are getting money that, some of these people are powerful institutions, the food industry that, RFK Jr. is going to fight against. And when you're fighting that kind of a battle, you have to be immaculate. You can't say stupid shit like Hamas is building bombs out of condoms that we didn't send to the region, right? You can't say shit like that. You can't have a lack of credibility because the media, which is sponsored by this governmental waste and all the people that are, sponsoring the media and they have these cushy deals. I mean, they've been having a party on the collective monies, which is always going to happen, right? Corruption sets in and people start abusing this money because it's, everybody's doing it and nobody's held accountable. And so when you're going to hold all these people accountable, you can't do anything that's going to cause a lack of credibility. So Trump isn't that guy. That's what I've been saying all along. Like he isn't the kind of guy that could fix this thing. He's not going to fix it because he's a corrupt piece of shit. He's more corrupt than any of these people, right? He's a bigger liar. When you're going to do this kind of work, you have to be trustworthy. They have to trust you that you're just not another scammer lying to them or whatever, reasons that Trump and Elon would have to lie about these things. And there's plenty of them, right? Some of them might be vindictive. Some of them might be they're getting their own kickbacks, but they're not trustworthy. And, to be a hero, you have to live a very boring life. To be a saint, to be somebody has an impeccable character, you have to be a cut above. Because the scrutiny that you're going to face is extraordinary. And so you can't have anything that would lead to people saying, well, I can't trust this motherfucker, which has happened, right? This is the issue. This is why I say the system can't be fixed, because there's no trustworthy people here. So then this happened as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cloud.
They're running shit now. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Rand Paul are running committees now, which is, Marjorie Taylor Greene is a disaster.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Far too long, D.C. politicians have gotten away with measuring their personal value and worth by how much of other people's money they give away. And for far too long, they self-righteously have opined that this spending was for altruistic purposes given out of care and compassion. For far too long, they've been more concerned with looking like they cared than having enough care and concern to actually do the due diligence to ensure that the tax dollars were being used wisely and effectively. And for far too long, those of us who've worked to uncover waste, fraud, and abuse have had to deal with what amounts to an unconstitutional fourth branch of permanent bureaucracy that has too often worked to ignore, obfuscate, delay, and frustrate our efforts to bring transparency and oversight. Over the last few weeks, the Doge effort has begun to uncover not only how massive the waste, fraud, and abuse is, but also the extent at which D.C. politicians and too many obstinate bureaucrats have coordinated to create what is essentially the largest money laundering scheme in history.
Okay, so that's the title of this video. And we don't need to go any further because it's a question of credibility, because everything he's saying is true. But Trump is a guy who laundered money and did, illegal and flirted with the law, skirted the law as a businessman. And then, of course, there was the bankruptcies, which we'll get into in a bit. But Trump has been a piece of shit scumbag who wouldn't pay his bills, screwed people over, screwed, hardworking people over, and is all about himself and money and these things. And when he became president, it was clear that he was going to, find a way to monetize his presidency, and he did. And his stupid followers will say, well, he didn't take a paycheck. He walked away with billions in assets, and, he was going to make this thing into something that benefited Trump, right? And, the whole thing, which we'll talk about in a second here. Trump using his name. So, yeah, they're all scumbags, right? They're all fucking stealing from you. They're all looting. And it's always easier to point out, oh, this person's a piece of shit looter, my enemy. Joe Biden did it. But I wouldn't do such a thing, right? And so it's easier to loot when everyone's looking at what Joe Biden did instead of what you're doing, right? So, who's going to audit Trump in his first presidency, his first term, and show you all the stuff that he did and all the ways he made bank? We know about Hunter Biden now. They made it very clear in the beginning that he was off limits, but eventually the truth come out. But nobody's talking about what Trump has stolen. And it's a lot. Like, it's going to be way more. Trump is certainly going to be better at that than Biden was, because Trump has been doing it as a businessman for years, and he's just so egregious in his arrogance about such things. So then this video came up. It speaks for itself here.
Welcome back to Hannity, and
Okay, let's get into the thing here.
we are in the Washington swamp, where for years far-left bureaucrats burned through your hard-earned tax.
Just them. Like, no fucking Republicans did anything. No Republican took any money fucking ever. Republicans don't do that kind of shit. Just Democrats.
Dollars on woke political causes, Green New Dealism, transgenderism, and, even anti-American propaganda. Those days are now over.
They're over. Those days are over. Now we're just going to loot on the right.
Or my interview with President Trump and Elon Musk.
As I scroll this information, and I'll scroll a lot more than I'll mention to
Look at
both
this
of
fuck.
you.
Look
And
at
this
this
is the
fucking guy.
cost saving.
Look at this ghoulish motherfucker. If this guy walked in to your laundromat or something, you'd be like, oh my God, who is it? Who is this alien-looking ghoulish motherfucker, right?
I want people at home to understand this part.
He's very serious, Trump.
Average American makes $66,000 a year.
Yeah.
Okay? We have $37 trillion in national debt.
Yes.
Now, all the money I'm about to mention and what we're going to scroll on our screen, and all.
Okay, so let's move forward to what Trump is going to say here. Trump is going to say something here. Right here, maybe.
Here for 2.5 weeks.
That was January.
Inflation
You were there
is
for a
back.
week.
Now think of it.
Okay, so the title of this video, Musk, Trump warn Americans what will lead the country to go bankrupt.
The massive waste, fraud, and abuse that has been going on, which is leading to a $2 trillion a year deficit. That's what the president was handed on Jan 20th, a $2 trillion deficit. It's insane.
For this fiscal year.
Yeah, we inherited.
Yeah.
And inflation is back. I'm only here for 2.5 weeks.
That was January.
Inflation
You were there
is
for a
back.
week.
Now think of it. Inflation's back, and they said, "Oh, Trump inflation." I had nothing to do with it. These people have run the country.
Okay, but you know, Trump did all the bailouts. He closed down the economy for COVID. But even before that, we were going into debt all the time. Like you can say he couldn't do it his first term, but you know, he added more to the deficit than any other previous president. And I think Biden topped him. But you know, it's going to be the same thing because it's cumulative, right? Cumulative. You know, in terms of the revolving interest, revolving debt, right? You all got people who've been in credit card debt know what I'm talking about. And you could just pay the minimum payment and the debt's growing bigger, so the interest grows bigger and you're paying more and more interest, right? So you're not even paying on the principal, and the principal becomes bigger. I mean, this is the whole, you know, this is how debt works. And so each succeeding president's going to have more debt. The country's going to go more in debt than previous ones. And, you know, they're not going to reverse this. Even if they cut $2 trillion off of the budget, the country's still going to be going into debt. And, you know, Trump's going to spend what on Gaza and, you know, these other things. He's just going to shift them on what he's spending on that Americans aren't happy about. He'll get rid of the Ukraine. He'll get rid of some of the left stuff. But he's not going to stop, you know, Trump, like, is a debt person. I want to hear what he says about bankruptcy. I don't know where that is here.
They spent money like nobody's ever spent. They were given $9 trillion to throw out the window. $9 trillion. And they spent it on the Green New scam, I call it. It's the greatest scam in the history of the country. One of them. We have
Greatest. One of the greatest ones.
One of them, I guess, but one of them.
Oh,
Dollar-wise,
and
probably.
DEI and wokeism and transgenderism.
Well, that's all part of it, yeah.
And LGBTQ+.
Yes.
By the way, not in America. Other countries, not here.
You know, the amazing thing is when you see, like, the teaching of DEI, $9 million. How do you spend $9 million to teach, no matter what it is? You could teach physics.
Totally.
You could go to MIT for a lot less.
Expensive.
Yeah,
Expensive.
the teaching of
expensive
DEI.
BS.
How much do you believe, Elon, you've identified in waste, fraud, abuse, corruption now, and how much do you anticipate you will?
Sure. Well, I think
1%. No, because it's so massive. This is huge money.
So what we found now is 1%.
We're just got to start.
Okay, so if they've done $1 trillion, right, Fish Boy, if they've, you know, they're saying it's up to $1 trillion of waste that they've uncovered. So that would mean there's $100 trillion of waste. And the deficit isn't, you know, just the start of it. I've showed you the national debt before, right? And so the national debt, I mean, I've showed you it a lot. You know, there's so much out there in terms of unfunded liabilities and the derivatives market that, you know, debt has become wealth. I mean, that happened a long time ago. And so you can't even get rid of the debt because it's all spoken for. The debt is, people are trading debt back and forth like it's currency. And so it's much more than the American people are $100 trillion in debt, just the people themselves. Credit cards, loans, you know, the government, all these things. American debt's over $100 trillion. So, you know, none of this stuff can fix that. It can stop it. Like, it sounds nice, and people are like, oh, we're finally dealing with a deficit. And when you hear about them cutting things that mean nothing to you, right, when you hear them getting rid of budgetary concerns, but these are two lying pieces of shit. This guy got over $20 trillion, $20 billion for his, you know, his scams, his, you know, cars and his SpaceX and these things, right? And so, like, you know, they're not trustworthy. And you think they're solving the problem, but they're not, because you need people who are, you know, themselves not corrupt to solve the problem. You can't put criminals in charge of fixing a problem, right?
Good as they are, they're not going to find some contract that was crooked, crooked as hell. And I mean, there's going to be so much that isn't found. But what is found, I think he's going to find $1 trillion.
Yeah, I think so.
But I think it's a very small percentage compared to what it is.
Let me go to an area that I think is key, and you talked about this in recent interviews, and that is we don't need a Department of Education, okay? And what some people are trying to do is stoke fears that, oh my gosh, my kid's not going to get the money for education, or grandma's Social Security and Medicare. This was a big promise of yours on the campaign trail. So I really want to give you both an opportunity to assure the American people you will keep, that money will be allocated for students, but with higher standards, for example, I would assume associated with monies given or
just
vouchers.
So much, and then Elon goes, but look, Social Security won't be touched, other than if there's fraud or something, we're going to find.
Okay, but you need to come up with 30, like, is it 50 trillion or $22 trillion, which is, 5 times the annual budget to pay for Social Security. Like, there's no money. It's $22 trillion in the hole. Like, the money that we paid in has already been spent. All the Social Security tax that you've paid is supposed to be going into some fund, like a retirement fund, accruing interest. So when it's time for you to get it, like, that's how those things work, like a 401k. But they've already spent the Social Security tax that you've put in. And so there's a deficit there, and they don't have the money. It's an unfunded liability. I showed you this on the national debt chart. The same thing with Medicaid, which is something like $50 trillion in the hole. Promised money that we don't have. Like, there's no budget for it. It's unfunded liabilities. And it's like $200 trillion. Like, it's so fucked. What they should be saying is it's so fucked we can't do anything about it. Them getting rid of $1 trillion of waste, if it was actually, them doing that, even if it was one-sided and, they were still scamming, I mean, that would be a step in the right direction, but we still are. He said that we're already $2 trillion in the hole for this year. And so, getting rid of $1 trillion of waste, and then that's just back to business as usual. We're still going to overspend. We're always going to be going into the deficit. There's no paying down on the debt. That's not happening. They can pretend it's going to happen, but clearly they don't need. They would have to get rid of like $7 trillion worth of spending, right? We'd have to budget all of everything they're spending would have to be under $5 trillion, and the extra would be going into paying off the debt. We're not even paying on the interest. We're not paying at all. It's just accumulating, right?
Going to be strengthened, but won't be touched. Medicare, Medicaid, none of that stuff is going to be touched.
Nothing.
You don't have to. Now, if there are illegal migrants in the system, we're going to.
So let me. I just want to find the line about bankruptcy, and I got a thing to do about that. So here's the thing about bankruptcy. Luckily, there's a transcript that made it easier for me.
A country is no different from an individual in that if an individual overspends, an individual can go bankrupt, and so can a country. And the massive waste, fraud, and abuse that has been going on, which is leading to a $2 trillion a year deficit.
The country is bankrupt. It's fucking bankrupt. We're just not acknowledging it, right? I talk about this. There's a great part of the movie, The Big Short. And, the main character, the guy who first discovered, whatever that guy who played Batman, one of the guys who played Batman, the guy from England. And he discovers that, don't tell me, don't care, I don't need to know. He discovers that, he's a real life guy, like he's playing a real life person, that the derivatives market is fucked, right? The credit default swaps. And so he wants to create he wants to short that, and the banks laugh at him. And he's shorting it, like he's got this whole hedge fund he's putting in there. And he's the one who sort of created this market where you could short the subprime loans, these poorly rated loans. And the banks are like, all right, we'll set this up, but we'll just be taking your money. Because they were saying the loan market was so solid and all these things. They were laughing at him. And then they figure out that he's right. And he's waiting to get paid, right? Like, it's come out now, it's been on the news that the subprime loans are fucked, but the bank won't pay him. And it takes another 6 to 8 months before they can get their own short positions, where they start shorting, they start betting against these loans, and then he finally gets paid out, right? Because the bank wouldn't acknowledge what they finally learned. But until this guy ended up shorting the subprime loans, and then these other people started to do it, it showed various people who figured this out. Until they started to do that, and then until it became common knowledge that the subprime loans were horseshit, and that people were buying these things and turning them into derivatives, and they're worth nothing because these mortgages. I mean, it's a whole thing. You can watch the whole movie. So, The Big Short and Margin Call cover this. But until it was acknowledged that we were financially fucked, nobody knew. Like, it just didn't. It was business as usual. It's like we're a walking corpse. And until somebody acknowledges that we're bankrupt, then, everyone just plays along. It's like a Monopoly game that's long since over, right? Where the banks own all the money and all the properties, and you're just going around the board, and you're paying, you're getting into debt because you don't have any money to pay every time you land on a hotel that the bank owns, right? It's like the whole fucking the whole game's over. But you keep on rolling the dice, getting into more and more debt, and no hope of ever getting out of it. You're not going to ever have money to buy anything, and everything's been purchased because, it's a monopoly, right? The game's over. But you keep on playing anyway. And so that's what's happening. We're bankrupt. We're fucked financially. There's no fixing it. There's no way to redo it. Our gross national product is what, $20 trillion, and our debt is 30. How the fuck are we going to, I mean, it's more than just that because it's a gross national product. There's not enough money out there to pay down on the debt, and the interest just keeps accumulating. At what point do you say, all right, we got to default on the debt, right?
That's what the president was handed on Jan 20th, a $2 trillion deficit. It's insane.
Okay, so I just missed it when I went back. We know what happens next. And so I want to say here is what Trump is. Now, Trump has gone bankrupt 6 times. And it's something where, the first time you do it, it's whatever you have to get over doing it, right? The embarrassment, admit to failure. But Trump, behaved in such a way financially that bankruptcy was something that he was willing to do. Like knew he could always do that and cut his losses. He did it 6 times. And then multiple other times, Trump has always been fiscally irresponsible, building projects, lots of failures. I've even talked about some of his failures on The Apprentice. And he was always getting bailed out, right? And he always landed back on his feet, even after 6 bankruptcies. And all the, the flim-flams, the smoke and mirrors of his economic prowess. And so this is something Trump does. He bankrupts shit, right? And he's totally going to do it to the American government. I mean, it's already bankrupt as it is. And so they're just, taking capital that's debt-based capital and turning it into land or whatever it is. This is what these guys are doing. All these people, not just the politicians, all these people who are looting what's left of American wealth until, America's economy's going to collapse because not just the national debt, but all of it. We have a morality bankruptcy. We're bankrupt morally. We have a toughness, we're become, the pussification of America, all the things. We're, all the ways that we're bankrupt. America's bankrupt on so many different levels. And Trump is good at that. Like, that's what he specializes in. He doesn't specialize in fiscal responsibility. The guy's gone, Chapter 11, 6 times, and then other, smaller, failures and things that he's done. Like, he's a bankrupt person. So the majority of Americans, myself included, don't want to spend money on all this bullshit, right? The things that they claim they're finding. And many of us were against the Ukrainian war in the first place. And now certainly all this time, all the money that we spent. And so the things that Trump is saying about the Ukraine and, all these things that are like these corrupt things that are going on. And we know that Biden and Hunter Biden had a relationship with the Ukraine and that money was laundered through that country. American taxpayer dollars were laundered to that country, and Biden and his clan got paid, right? And the neocons were pushing for this whole thing. It's a debacle. But, there's a delicate balance. We have this shit that's going on with Canada now, and Trump is, bullying everybody he can. And we're sitting on a fucking, we're living in a glass house. We're sitting on a card house, right? Humpty Dumpty. And, it's a very fragile situation. And Trump is just coming in swinging, which is entertaining. I like it because it's entertaining. And what he's saying here, I agree with some of this stuff that he's going to say about the Ukraine. We agree with. And yet, when you have such a criminal-based, scam-based economy, and we're all 100% dependent on it, you can't do shit like this, right? It's a very delicate balance to keep this thing, because it's all based in perception. And it's all going to come toppling down. And Trump is doing everything he can to make it topple. And so, yeah, we all agree with him. Like, most people don't want the Ukrainian war. But you have to go about it in a certain way. Because it's, layers of corruption in every country, in a global economy that's based in corruption, and all these foreign policies that are based in these, delicate alliances and shit. And Trump's just coming in with a sledgehammer, which we all kind of were like, oh, that's great, until the fucking aftermath happens, which will be World War III and economic collapse and all these things, right?
Thank you. Yes.
We're hearing that Russia wants to force Ukraine to hold new elections in order to sign any kind of a peace deal. Is that something that the U.S. would ever support?
Well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have martial law, or essentially martial law in Ukraine, where the leader in Ukraine, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating. And
I don't know if that's true, but that's fucked. Again, it's Trump talking. But I'm sure its approval rating isn't good. And there's a bunch of power brokers in the Ukraine who wanted war for whatever reason. And Zelensky ran on being a peaceful guy. He's a comedian. He dressed up in dresses and, was an actor. And he ran on being a guy who was going to bring peace with Russia. But then they basically threatened him into this war. They bullied him into coming into this war. And now the country's fucked. And they haven't had an election in years. And, so this is legitimate, stuff that I'm just finding out about. And, of course, it's coming from the least reliable source. The guy who says you can build bombs out of condoms, right? But, some of this is true. And the whole thing is fucked, right?
Our country has been blown to smithereens. You got most of the cities are laying on their sides. The buildings are collapsed. It looks like a massive demolition site. So many of the cities. They haven't.
So at this point, I was saying to myself, it sounds like Gaza. And then Trump's going to say it.
Done it in Kiev because I guess they don't want to shoot too many rockets in there. They've done it 20%, but they haven't done it 100%. If they wanted to do it 100%, it would probably happen very quickly. But you have cities that are absolutely decimated. And yeah, I would say that, when they want a seat at the table, you could say the people wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, it's been a long time since we've had an election. That's not a Russia thing. That's something
She's trying to get
coming from me and coming from many other countries also. Ukraine is being just wiped out. Look at what's happening to the cities. There are cities, there's not even a building standing. It's a massive, you talk about Gaza.
No, you talked about Gaza.
It's literally, these cities look like Gaza. Actually, many have, percentage-wise, more buildings knocked down than in Gaza. So, people are tired of it. People want to see something happen. And, the other
raising her hand.
Thing that it's been bothering me for a long time, because I solved the problem with NATO. They paid hundreds of billions of dollars into the funds of NATO when I said you got to pay, because the United States was paying for European countries, and then they take advantage of us on trade. But I've seen it. Look, they have to pay. They have to find out, where's the money going to? We have, I believe President Zelensky said last week that he doesn't know where half of the money is that we gave him. Well, we gave them, I believe, $350 billion. But let's say it's something.
Okay, so clearly, I said all along this is a money laundering scheme. And then, it came out. That Miranda Devine who did all that, again, it's relative to what you believe or don't, but she was the New York Post person that broke all the Hunter Biden. And she did an interview with some Tucker Carlson or somebody. And they talked about all the relationships, financial relationships Joe Biden had with the Ukraine. Of course, there's that video out there where he was in charge of $1 billion of aid when Obama was president. And he wasn't going to give it to him unless they fired the prosecutor. that was going after this company that his son worked for, which they denied and said that was fake news, but, it was obviously the case. And so, and the guy was going after Burisma. I mean, again, what you can believe or not believe. But Joe Biden has a Ukrainian guy. And the neocons wanted this thing because they've been trying to break Russia ever since Russia blocked them in Syria. War blocked them in Syria. And so they thought they could get rid of Russia the same way they could, collapse Russia the same way the war with Afghanistan, Russia and Afghanistan war collapsed, right? There was this movie called Charlie Wilson's War. And the Russians were doing well in Afghanistan using, these helicopters, these military helicopters. And the U.S. gave the Pashtuns, these warrior people, these rocket launchers to get rid of the helicopters. But they didn't know how to use them. And so this guy, Charlie Wilson, played by Tom Hanks in the movie, I don't know, again, how accurate it was. He went in there and he got money to fund training for them. And that's where they got the relationship with bin Laden and all that shit came about. Bin Laden was an American-trained guy. Like this, you can tell how all these things, once an American asset, CIA asset, always an asset, right? Like he provided a lot of cover for all of the shit that America was doing. And this is how, corrupt and fucked the country is. The CIA is always doing evil shit. And the evil shit keeps the truth that the economy's collapsed and the moral, all the things that they're making America fall apart from falling apart, right? And so, Trump coming in like with a bulldozer, there is corruption there. But, people will believe or not believe that it was just the Democrats and that the Republicans aren't a part of this, but it really is a condemnation of the whole government. It's not a deep state, right? It means that these guys have been doing this forever, and Trump is all of a sudden calling people on it. But Trump is the most corrupt of all of them, right? Like just based on who he was as a businessman. He was always doing corrupt business deals and illegal things and, morally reprehensible things.
Thing less than that, but it's a lot. And we have to equalize with Europe because Europe has given a very much smaller percentage than that. I think Europe has given 100 billion, and we've given, let's say, 300 plus.
So this war has cost close to $500 billion.
And it's more important for them than it is for us. We have an ocean in between, and they don't. But where is all the money that's been given? Where is it going? And I've never seen an accounting of it. We give hundreds of billions of dollars. I don't see any accounting. So I want to see peace. Look, you know why I
wonder if this is a Forbes video, so I wonder if she's Forbes.
I don't want all these people killed anymore. I'm looking at people that are being killed, and they're Russian and Ukrainian people, but they're people. Doesn't matter where
they're people. They're people just like us. They're actually human beings.
From on the whole
not in Gaza. The Palestinians aren't people, but these guys are.
Planet. And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost.
She's like, can you get out of the way? I got a camera.
All of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way. And President Biden, in all fairness, he doesn't have a clue. What he was so bad for this. He was so bad, so pathetic, so sad. But with
I don't know why the camera's on her and not Trump, but it's interesting.
Well, that being said, look, it is what it is. When I left, there was no chance that this could have happened, but it happened because we had incompetent leadership at many different levels. But when you see what's taken place in Ukraine with millions of people killed, including the soldiers, millions of people killed, a big percentage of their cities knocked down to the ground. I don't know how anybody even lives there. You know, when they say they took a poll and Zelensky's at 4%, who's living there? You know, I mean, it's hard to believe that people live there. Their cities are being knocked down. And this is something that would have never happened. And by the way, for 4 years, it didn't happen. It was never going to happen. Go ahead.
So that's that. Like I agree with that, in principle, but we know what a piece of shit liar Trump is, right? You know, this is the thing, right? This is the whole thing. Like, it's just somebody saying, I'm a good guy, they're a bad guy, and I'm honest, and, you know, and I just lied to you about the condom thing and everything else and my fake assassination attempt. But you can trust me. Like, I'm not going to steal from you. Those guys are thieves.
Tonight, President Trump parroting Russian propaganda as he falsely accuses Ukraine of starting the war, which began almost 3 years ago.
Okay, like, by who? Why is it you're saying Ukraine started the war? Like, why? How can that be false, right? You know, any kind of situation like this, there's a delicate balance. Now, in Gaza, they're saying that Hamas started the war, where, you know, this is an ongoing conflict where Israel has been glomming onto land. So even if Hamas is what they say it is, you know, I don't believe it is. You know, I believe that Hamas is, you know, an asset of Israel. But let's say it is what they say it is. It's not them who started the war. Israel is taking land from the Palestinian people. They have been since 1945. They have been encroaching and building settlements in land that's supposed to be Palestine. And so they are the aggressors, 100%. This is irrefutable, right? Now, with the Ukrainians, it would be the Russians starting the war if they didn't get backing. You know, we now know from Trump, at least what he said, $450 billion were sent to the Ukrainians, and then whatever money they spent. So this is like $1 trillion war. I mean, you know, wars are going to cost. If America goes to World War III, it's going to cost $20 trillion. Like, shit's expensive now, right? Inflation. And so, you know, and everything's so pricey with the technology and these things in these wars. I mean, the wars are very expensive. So you would say that Russia was the aggressor because they're the ones with the more, you know, substantial military, except it was Joe Biden pushing for the Ukrainians to be part of NATO and these other things that created this conflict. And it could have been de-escalated, but the Ukrainians, backed by, you know, whatever people, warmongers in their country, and backed by Biden's, and the people who are all going to get paid. You know, these warmongers in Ukraine, they can leave the country. They now have tens of millions of dollars each of U.S. taxpayer dollars, as does the, you know, Biden clan. And so those people all made out, right? And all the money that was, you know, the money laundering part of this thing. But to say that this is a false claim, Trump falsely claims Ukraine started war with Russia, you know, it's more complex than this, right? It isn't Ukraine that started the war, but it's, you know, Biden and these people that wanted this, and whatever percentage you want to put on the Russians. But it's much more, you know, nuanced than this fuck is saying, right?
When Vladimir Putin's troops invaded Ukraine. I want to bring in our chief national affairs correspondent, Jeff Zeleny. He's traveling with the president in Florida. So, Jeff, what exactly did President Trump say?
Well, if it was some of the sharpest criticism we have heard.
Okay, let's just go here for Trump. Here it is. Let's go. Here he is.
Specifically about that, just a short time ago.
And I think it's going the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
That's what we heard that say that with the, you know, the women's question.
You could have made a deal. You should have never started, of course. Well, if that is not just a misstatement of history, of course.
Okay, but, you know, what he's saying, Trump is saying there, it's not a misstatement of history. And again, I'm not backing Trump. Or, you know, we all know what happened here. I mean, all the things I just said. It's a complex situation based in the official story. You know, who the fuck knows? You know, I have friends in the Ukraine who are part of my Sajmarg meditation. I know some of them personally, like we've met, I've had conversations with them. And then some of them are just people that, you know, I had a lot of these people who were doing Sajmarg, and I've unfriended most of them because of the heartfulness thing. But none of them seem to be affected by the war at all. Like, they post shit from CNN. Like, these are people in the Ukraine who are posting American, you know, coverage of the. They don't even know what's going on in their own country. Like, they're not posting local videos from local people of the things that are going on there. They post, like, shit that's going on in, you know, Western media. Like, I don't know what the media situation is, but they have the ability to be on Facebook. And some of them are posting shit that's like, like just regular Facebook shit. Every once in a while I see these people and I'll click on their name, if I'm on Facebook, which I'm not that much, but, they're posting shit. And I look to see if they've had any, they have any kind of stuff that's coming from the Ukraine that they know of people, not just some propaganda shit that's going around social media, but like they're seeing, like pictures of stuff they're seeing or stories. A lot of it's in Ukrainian. There's a translate thing. But I haven't seen them have any personal. So there's probably about 10 people on Facebook I know from that region. And some of them post quite frequently. And like I said, some of these people I knew personally. And I don't know if there's a war even going on there. Like, they don't even know. Like, they don't seem to be affected by it at all. And like I said, a lot of them post like just regular go into the park with their kids kind of shit, right? Like that kind of stuff.
In the first Trump administration, their incursion was spreading and growing, but the American president did not stop there. He went on to essentially belittle and question the authority of the Ukrainian president. He said his approval rating was at 4%. There is no evidence to back that up. The latest poll
of course,
from a couple months or so ago was right around 50%.
There's no way he's got 50% approval because they're getting their ass kicked. Like, you don't get that kind of a beating. See, they've just been putting, you can't believe him or him. That's the problem, right? That's the point of this whole video. You can't believe either side. There's no way it's 50%. They're not telling you the truth of how bad the Ukrainians got their ass kicked. And that's what Trump's saying. You got your ass kicked, you have to deal. But again, Trump's just not trustworthy or any of these things, right? There's Zelensky. Let's go to the Zelensky video here.
The people of Crimea, from what I've heard, would rather be with Russia than where they were.
Putin's a killer. A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent? President Putin?
Yeah, that's true. But now he's not saying that. Some more things recently here.
Without, we should note, any representative from Ukraine, the country that was invaded, in that room. Trump went so far as to falsely claim that somehow Ukraine and Ukrainians started the war.
I think I have the power to end this war, and I think it's going very well. But today I heard, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
The talks between the U.S. and Russia lasted 4 hours. This morning, the Kremlin said...
Okay, let's get to this guy here.
Comments.
Unfortunately, President Trump, I have great respect for him as a leader of a nation that we have great respect for. The American people, who always support us, unfortunately lives in this disinformation space.
Okay, so Trump ain't going to give you no more money, right? Like, this was going to happen. Trump was going to bully them. Like, this had to come down to this because, they can say Trump's which they will, like he's being run by Putin or whatever. I don't know what kind of financial relationship there is there or whatever's going on. But this is clear that the Ukrainians are going to have to eat shit. Like, it's just because the money train is dried up. Trump wasn't going to pay any more money. The American people, we don't want to give any money. I don't know. I don't see those Ukrainian flags anymore. Remember when everyone was putting those Ukrainian flags everywhere? And you see how people had bumper stickers about supporting the Ukraine? And maybe there's some Ukrainians out there. But, it's just a money laundering scheme. It's throwing good money away after bad. Like, it was a bad investment. And whatever happened, it's lost. Whatever the neocons believe that they were going to break Russia with this thing hasn't happened. And so, Trump is, again, not somebody who's trustworthy. And maybe it's, 4% is silly. But his approval rating isn't 50%. Like, that's just a fucking lie. Then why not hold an election, right? Like, I don't know the last time they've held an election there, but they haven't held them during this war. This is a martial law situation where they're forcing young men to enlist in the army because they have nothing left, right? They've depleted their youth. They fucked their country because, their population of young people has drastically been reduced, and that's your wealth right there.
The U.S. president, he says, living in a disinformation space. Trump's inclination towards Russian President Vladimir Putin is drawing bipartisan criticism. Democrats pushing back against...
Yeah, but you know what? the American people do not want to send another cent over there for a war that's already lost. And so without American money, the British government I saw a little video clip. I didn't see the video, I saw the title. But Britain is starting to try to get Europe to make up some of the difference here. But they don't have the money. Without American backing, it's lost. The war is already lost, and Biden wasn't willing to admit it because it would have been a loss on his, at his dime. Biden was never going to say that this war is, a lost cause, because they were like, well, you gave them $300 billion and we're fucking lost. And so, he couldn't say that. And now Trump can, because he can blame it all on Biden. And, the American people want no part of it. Like we saw during the election cycle when Kamala Harris was saying they still wanted to pay, want to give Ukraine support. People were fucking against that shit. Like she had to stop talking about that shit because she couldn't say, yeah, I'm going to defund Ukraine, because she was a part of that debacle. And so, like, the Ukrainians are fucked. They're in a fucked position. Like, they just have to accept everything. I mean, Trump is, the American ally in this situation was the only thing that was keeping this thing going. And without it, without any verbal support, Trump's turning on them like he's turning on the Palestinian people. This is what Trump does. And, they're going to bully them into getting this thing done because they have no choice. If they go into war, they have more escalation of this war. Russia will end up annexing the whole country. Now, Trump said somewhere that the Ukraine should just become part of Russia again. Like, Trump's solving these problems. Like, Gaza should just be given to Israel, and, Ukraine should just be given over to the fucking Russians. I mean, the whole thing's fucked, right? Like, Trump is a nightmare in himself. And like I said, there's a delicate balance here. And things are going to start toppling. And, Europe and these other countries, Canada, they're not digging Trump. And I don't think that's going away, because I don't think Trump's backing down on any of these things. And, it's something where they're going to always be very wary of America. I'm sure there's rumblings about taking America down now that hadn't been there before. And we'll see what happens. We'll see how this all unfolds. But again, neither one of these guys is trustworthy. None of these people are trustworthy. They're all lying pieces of shit. And that's the reality we live in. You can't trust anybody to do good quality work, right? In society, and this tells you more about where we are than anything else. Like this is big stuff that I'm saying. These are big events that happen. But it's really the small things that take you down. So, everyone has a role to play in society. Like, that's what a job is. Like, it could be something else in a tribal situation, but everyone has a role to play. Some of your role might be a parent. Some of your role might be being a son or a daughter or a brother or sister. You have these roles that you play in a family unit and in society. There's things that you have. Think about the responsibilities you have as a person. And some of that is your job. You have a job, and most jobs are fairly easy. And most people can do a competent job. Just be a competent person, right? And part of your competency is make sure that you drive in a safe manner. Like, you don't drive in the opposite lane. You don't go all Europe or England and drive on the left side of the road just because fuck it. I'm driving on the left side of the road, right? Like, things like that. Like, you don't run through red lights. Like, I'm not going to fucking acknowledge like, you have to obey the laws, right? And if you don't, there's chaos. And if nobody recognized red lights anymore, people just said, all right, we're not, like, let's say half the population said, I'm not going to stop at red lights anymore. Or even a third of the population, there'd be chaos. You have to just, work within the confines of society. And what the left did with all their crazy gender shit and all that fucking bullshit that they pulled, and what Trump did as a president and as a politician, and taking things that used to be sacred within the political, just in terms of, the fourth wall, taking down the fourth wall of politics and, pretending, not pretending to do all the bullshit like when the British put on those goofy wigs. It's just part of the parliamentary type of proceedings and, all the things that they do. It's just this pomp and circumstance. And it keeps the system together. These social conventions and rituals that people do, But the rituals and things he do is what holds your society together. Even though I dislike those things, I don't want them. I'm glad they're being taken down. And they're not being taken down just by Trump. They're being taken down by, the powers that be, the divine forces running the world, and the internet and all the things that have opened up all these, layers of information, getting rid of all, why do you have to wear a tie? What's the purpose of a fucking tie, right? Like, I'm never going to wear a tie again in my life. It's stupid. Like, it has no purpose. It's just a decorative thing that you're putting a noose around your neck, right? But, these conventions of dress and, whatever it is that people have, all these things that are, they're goofy and they've lost their true meaning. Like, why the fuck do we even do these things? People don't even know why we do them anymore, like lots of these things, right? And you have that in government. But the problem is when you have a debt-based economic system, you can't start just ripping these things out, whatever they might be, whatever the constructs might be, and expect the system to survive, because the system's hanging by a fucking thread, right? And Trump is just like, this blatant lie about the Hamas condoms. This is not a person who's, making good decisions. He's not a good leader. He's not an honest person. And he's not, a trustworthy person. And he's not a thoughtful or research-based person. He just, he's a fly by the seat of his pants. Somebody will bail him out. And what I was saying earlier about, him going bankrupt, people have ways of dealing with stress. They have ways of dealing with conflict. That you have your way, like your way. Like, how do you deal with conflict? How do you deal with stress? Watch TV, alcohol, go into denial, stress about not sleep, take drugs. What is it? Like, how do you deal with stress? Like, how you deal with stress. Maybe you don't think about it, but you have a way. People have a system on how to deal with things, right? And Trump has a way of fucking things up, and then he goes bankrupt. Like, that's a pattern of behavior in his life. And, bankrupt in America and, sending it down into, America's already bankrupt. So, he's, the thing that Trump would do was bring it out that America's bankrupt. Them saying that they can cut $1 trillion off the deficit, well, whoopity fucking do, right? That's nothing. Yeah, is it good? Sure, it's $1 trillion. But they spent, almost, over a third of that on just the Ukrainian war. Never mind all these other things. Just all the stuff that went with the COVID, all the bullshit, the bailouts. And the money didn't go to these people. It just gets, it gets laundered to other people through these false fucking things they're doing. I've been talking about this for years. And both the right and the left do this. And Trump is doing it now whilst showing you how the left scammed you. Trump is scamming you right now. And then talking bullshit to his dumbass supporters who should have woke up years ago to his incompetence and fucking flim-flam, grifter ways. But, and so, we're fucked, right? Like, we're so fucked because people can't see the obvious truth in front of them. But if they did, the system would collapse. Because if you don't believe in this system, and nobody should believe in it, but they do, thank God, because as soon as people stop believing it, it's held up by perception. The system is only held up because we're pretending that the monopoly money that we have is that, that runs our world is worth something, and it's not, right? And as soon as people realize, oh, the economy's, we're bankrupt, then, then we're bankrupt, right? Until then, we are bankrupt. We just aren't acknowledging it. It's like having cancer, but pretending you don't have it. This tumor, and not going to the doctor and getting confirmed and pretending you're 100% healthy. And you got this massive tumor or massive tumors that are protruding out of your body, and you just pretend they're not there. And Trump is as much a part of this as anybody else, maybe even more so now because of the way he's running this thing. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing to the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.